Now the recipe says about 2 ounces. I'm Canadian, we don't use ounces, no idea what that means, but I usually use about 1.5 cups of dried mushrooms. I really love mushrooms, so I want to make sure my risotto has that rich flavor. And welcome to my kitchen. If you are new here, my name is Kaylee, and today in my kitchen we're going to be cooking up something a little bit different. Now that I'm not able to go to the supermarket as often as I'd like and pick up all those exotic, interesting ingredients, it is really important to do your best to stay at home, stay safe. That's why I want to hopefully encourage you to use what you have, make the most of it. Today we're just going to be cooking something that I felt like making, and I had all the ingredients in my pantry. So at this time I think it's really important that we take advantage of all the stuff that we usually have kind of tucked away, ingredients you might forget about, and make good use of those things because there's lots of good stuff out there. Today we're going to be making sort of an adapted version of Chrissy Teigen's mushroom risotto. I'm no risotto expert, but when I tried her recipe out, it was just to die for. I mean, it's Chrissy Teigen. It's going to be indulgent, it's going to be easy to make, and it comes from the part of the cookbook that's called something like recipes that are intimidating but shouldn't be. So I want to show you how easy risotto is to make. When we're going through it, I'm going to show you some sort of modifications that you can make and talk about some things that you can substitute in or out depending on what you just happen to have in your own kitchen. Risotto, obviously we're going to be using rice. Now traditionally risotto is made with arborio rice, but I don't happen to have that at the moment. So we're going to be using this glutinous rice. You're looking for a white rice that's sort of shorter grain. To make it nice and rich and creamy, we're going to be using some chicken stock and some mushrooms. Now these are dried mushrooms that I happen to have. I'm not telling you to run out and go to Costco because I know that that's a crazy madhouse right now, but if you happen to be there, I bought these forever ago. They last so long. It's this dried mushroom mix. I love it. Her recipe uses only porcini mushrooms, but this was probably the same cost as a little thing of dried porcinis, and it's enormous. It lasts forever. We're gonna be soaking these, and it's also gonna make a bit of a mushroom broth. So with that chicken stock, it's gonna create just the most delicious mixture for our rice. We're also going to be using some butter, Parmesan cheese, a shallot. If you don't have a shallot at home, you can also substitute in either a small onion or just 1/4 of an onion diced up. I'm going to throw in some bacon. I had thought that a recipe had bacon. I've made it so many times before, but now that I think about it, I was getting mixed up with Giada's famous lobster linguine pasta, which is another great decadent find. The last thing that a recipe is going to need are some peas. Usually frozen peas are the best option. I braved the storm, went to the grocery store, all they had was canned peas. We're gonna make do. I think it's still gonna be delicious. With the combination of everything else, it's going to be divine. First thing we need to do is rehydrate our dried mushrooms. Now her recipe actually says that you should do this for about an hour to 4 hours, but my hack to fast track this is to actually rehydrate these with some super hot water. So I actually boiled some water before getting started. I turned the kettle off, but the water's nice and hot. It's gonna quickly rehydrate my mushrooms. That way later I can chop them up to add into the risotto. I usually use about 1.5 cups of dried mushrooms. And now we're gonna pour in about 2 cups of super hot water. Now, if you notice some of them are floating, then you can just sort of gently tap those down to make sure it's all submerged. Then we're gonna cover this, set it to the side, and come back to it in a few minutes. All right, time to quickly get all of our ingredients prepped, or our mise en place. I know we're being so fancy with our canned peas, but we're gonna make sure everything is ready to go. So once we toast up the rice and start adding in all that good stuff, it's nice and easy. We're gonna finally chop up 1 shallot. And then we're gonna open up our peas. We only need 1/2 cup. I haven't had canned peas in ages, but it's gonna be delicious regardless. Canned peas aren't necessarily as good as what we would normally use. So the recipe calls for frozen peas. Those are actually a great substitution because they're kind of flash frozen, right? They're not pre-cooked. These are already cooked. They're nice and soft. We'll say that instead of mushy. I actually really like using fresh peas too, if you can get your hands on this. So if you're watching this in the summertime, try that out. Fresh peas in here, just add that little bit of crunch. It's just perfect. Fresh peas, canned peas, fresh peas, canned peas. We're gonna chop up a few pieces of bacon, maybe about 2 or 3, depending on how thick the slices are. All right, it's time for the magic. These have just been sitting in the container for about 10 minutes, but they are nice and hot. The water, being as hot as it is, really rehydrates everything super quickly. And even by covering this, it kind of helps to steam and circulate that heat. But I find with this mix, boiling water, 10 minutes, 20 if you feel like you have the time, will do the trick, just to make sure they're rehydrated. I wanna make sure that I'm not wasting any of that mushroom broth. So I've got my fine strainer here. We're gonna strain off any of the broth and we're gonna later combine that with our chicken stock. It's gonna make that really rich broth stock that we're gonna later add to our toasted rice. I wanna strain off as much liquid as possible from the mushrooms. I don't wanna waste any of that. And this is the part that is the messiest. Chrissy uses cheesecloth in her recipe to squeeze out any excess moisture from the mushrooms. I don't have cheesecloth on me today, so we're gonna be using paper towel. I know it's high demand, this is controversial, but I'm gonna use just a little bit of paper towel to squeeze any excess moisture off. Ooh, look at that rich, deep color. Now we've got some mushrooms that won't make a watery mess in our risotto. Now, for the sake of time, because I know we've got lots of time at home, working from home these days, but we wanna make sure that we're making good use of that time. Before tackling chopping these up, I'm gonna add in about 3 cups of chicken stock, chicken broth, whatever you have at home, into this saucepan, and then we're gonna keep this nice and hot in the back. We're gonna put our burner at about a low to medium heat. We don't want it to boil, it doesn't have to come to a simmer. We just wanna make sure it's still nice and hot. So when we add it into our risotto, it doesn't cool anything down. Lastly, time to give these a nice fine chop. Okay, now truly our mies are on place and we're ready to get started with toasting our rice. All right, first things first, we are going to cook up our bacon. It doesn't need to be super crispy, but we at least don't want it raw when we're putting everything in. And we also want some of that fat to cook off. We're gonna use that to help toast up the rest of our ingredients. With a medium saucepan, we're gonna heat this up to about a medium-high heat, just so we can get that bacon going. Now that the bacon is starting to cook up, we're gonna add in our shallots. All right, now that these shallots are starting to get nice and translucent, I already portioned off some butter. Truthfully, because we're using bacon, we don't really need to add the butter. We've got enough grease and richness in there, but why not? We're being decadent. And then we're adding in 1 cup of rice to toast up. I'm strictly eyeballing it here. The rice is going to soak up most, if not all, of that oil and that butter. That's perfect, that's what we're looking for, and we want to toast this for about 2 minutes. It's time to add in a little bit of salt. Now, traditionally, this is where you would add in white wine. Not a big drinker, I don't happen to have white wine on me, but we do make a lot of Asian food here. So I have some rice wine. I mean, this is rice, it needs wine, so we're just gonna add in a little bit. Her recipe calls for a 1/2 cup of dry white wine. Putting in that little bit of rice wine actually helped to nicely deglaze the bottom of that pan. So any of those crispy bits from the bacon that might have cooked on earlier are coming off, so good call. Once most of the wine has cooked off, so you do want to make sure that you're keeping that heat consistent, then it's time to add in our mushroom broth. So I've got it back here. We're gonna start by adding in about 1 cup or 1 ladleful. Cook that off, and then we'll add in a little bit more. As soon as that chicken and mushroom broth has been absorbed, then we know it's time to add in a little bit more. And that's all we do. We add in more broth, about half a cup at a time, stir, let it cook until it's absorbed. Then you add in more broth, half a cup at a time, stir, cook till it's absorbed, and you do this over and over again. This cooking process takes about 20-ish minutes in total, but we really want to make sure that you're gradually adding that broth. You don't want to add too much. You don't want this to be wet and mushy, and you want to add in just enough so nothing burns. So we've been cooking this for about 15-20 minutes. We've added in a few scoops of the broth a little bit at a time. It's okay if you have a little bit of leftover broth. That's normal. It's really deep in color. It's got a great flavor. And the rice right now is nice and tender, but the middle is just still slightly firm. So it's time to add in our mushrooms. Then we'll be adding in Parmesan cheese, a little bit of black pepper, and I'm gonna put our peas in last. The time is here. We've got our risotto in here. I had to add in a little bit of brightness, a little bit of freshness, so I topped it off with a few spring onions that I had chopped up. Of course, if you use the frozen or fresh peas, that would add enough of a little bit of fresh bite, some beautiful color. I also added just a sprinkle of some salt and pepper. So let's try it out. The peas are just as soft as the rest of the rice, but the flavor is there. It tastes awesome. If you do happen to have any kind of herbs or anything you'd put on top, adds a little bit of crunch. Spring onions are great. I imagine a little bit of parsley would brighten it up as well. The taste is there, the flavor is there. Using any of the tips and tricks that we used in here will help you to create a beautiful risotto. It tastes delicious. It's more interesting than just eating regular old rice. Plus, you can add in some of your other kitchen finds. If you are inspired by this video, inspire us more. If you recreate it, tag me on any and all social media. My handles are here. And if you have any other ideas, what are some pantry staples that you have that we can transform in the kitchen? Or what's something that you have that you don't know how to transform? Let's see if we can come up with it together. Comment down below what we should make next. As always, if you like this video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe as well. And I'll see you next time, right here in self-isolation in my kitchen. Okay, bye guys.